everybody, to this CAAL-sponsored Counter 5 Informal Introduction webinar. It's going to be presented by Melissa Belvadi, who's a collections librarian at the University of Prince Edward Island. She was waving to you there out the window. Per our usual practice, I just want to remind everybody that the webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the CAAL website soon after, as well as any slide deck that, that Melissa has. There will be an opportunity for questions and discussion at the end of the presentation, so I ask that somebody's joining us. So I ask that you can hold questions until the end of the presentation. We'll leave lots of time for that. And so as to minimize background noise during the webinar, I also ask that you keep yourself muted if possible for the duration of the webinar, unless you wish to speak. So, you know, if you want to say something or ask something, just please unmute. If you're joining us by phone only and not the computer, and you don't have a mute option on your phone, you can use *6 to mute, and it also unmutes you. Just a heads up that you can ask questions out loud by unmuting, but also we do have a chat function that you can ask your questions in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat for the whole duration of the session. So if you have any problems, questions, concerns, or whatever, please put them in there. And if you want me to relay your question, I will do that. Or any comments. Just an FYI, for those who are new to the Teams environment, you can turn on closed captioning if you want to. There are 3 dots on that menu ribbon in the middle of your screen. If you click on that, you can turn on live captions. Also on there, for those of you with low bandwidth, where video might be an issue in terms of the lag in seeing the webinar, you can actually click on turn off incoming video, and that will help with the bandwidth issues potentially. It won't, you'll still be able to see the slideshow and everything that's being shared on the screen. You just won't see the video, the people who are sharing their videos. So before I turn the floor over to Melissa, I'd like to acknowledge that the Council of Atlantic University Libraries, Conseil des Bibliothèques Universitaires de l'Atlantique, CAAL-CBPA, represents member libraries from across the region, all of whom sit on the unceded and traditional territories of First Peoples. In Newfoundland and Labrador, our libraries sit on the homelands of the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunavut and the Innu of Nitassinan. I sometimes get that mispronounced, but that's close. The Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq peoples. And in Prince Edward Island in Nova Scotia, we find our friends and colleagues situated on the territory of the Mi'kmaq. In New Brunswick, libraries are found on the land of the Wolastoq, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. And we at CAAL-CBPA wish to express our sincerest gratitude to the First Peoples who share their ancestral homelands with us all. So thank you all for joining us. And I know there's not just CAAL members, but CRKN and COPOL members as well. Thank you for joining us as well. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Melissa Belvadi, our collections librarian at the University of Prince Edward Island, and she will introduce us to Counter 5. Melissa.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I know from the input that everyone gave to Cynthia in signing up for this that there's an enormous amount of interest in the comparison between Counter 4 and Counter 5. So I'm going to have what looks like a tiny bit at the beginning. Then I'm going to go into some more of the in-depth explanations of what the metrics and so forth of Counter 5 are. But then after that, I have a lot of great detail on the Counter 4 to Counter 5 conversion or transition. So there's a lot of that coming. So hopefully everybody can see my slide deck. And so let's just get right into it. And by the way, I have 2 screens. So if you're watching me on the video, my head's going to be turned sideways to the camera. Okay, so basic vocabulary for Counter 5. First of all, you've got reports, and unlike Counter 4, you've got 2 different kinds of reports, what are called master reports and standard views, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Then important to understand that you've got the metrics, what kind of usage is being counted, and then you've got attributes, the subsets of what's being counted. I'm going to go into all of this in a lot more detail, but this is the critical new vocabulary with Counter 5: master reports, standard views, metrics, and attributes. So reports, first of all, master reports, and there was no equivalent for this in Counter 4. Counter 4 just had the set of reports, and that was that. A master report has all the possible data for that report type. There are four: the platform report, database report, title report, and item report. And here's a quick Counter 4 comparison. The platform report compares to the old PR1, the database report to a combination of the DB1 and DB2. The title report is all of the title level reports combined. And there was no equivalent for the item level reports in Counter 4. And this is actually giving us literally, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, it's pretty cool, literally article level as opposed to, say, journal title level data, as well as multimedia object level data for the vendors that support IR. And unlike the Counter 4 reports, which were basically canned fixed reports, for the master reports, there's an enormous flexible selection of the attributes and the metrics, both in terms of displaying them in the report and in terms of filtering on them to create subset master reports when you want to. And there was no equivalent of that in short of just doing magic in Excel on your own with the old reports. Okay, so the standard views is intended to be more similar to what you were used to in Counter 4. This is, they take the master reports and they pre-select combinations of attributes and metrics. So these are not flexible, except for date range, because they're intended to be nice, easy little canned reports. So the and here's again my mapping from actually, these are from the, from the Counter 5 masters and their corresponding standard views. So there's only one for the platform report. There's two for the database report. There's several for the title report and two for the item report. And I'll get into a bit more detail again as we go. So the two big categories to make any sense of this data is the metrics and the attributes. So I'm going to go through the metrics first, because this is a lot more granular, you might say more complicated, you might say more powerful than what we had in Counter 4. So basically, your metrics are investigations of things for the most part. I'm thinking mostly on the title report side. And when you get to platform and database report, you also have things like searches. As well as these, but most of the time what people are concerned about is the title level. So this is an important concept. There are investigation metrics and there are request metrics, but the request metrics are a subset of the investigation. So anytime you're looking at an investigation metric, it includes the specific full text request metrics as for that same title or whatever at the same time. And I for the next few slides, I stole them from one of the foundation classes that Project Counter has set up, because I didn't see any point in rewriting them all. So another very important distinction is total versus unique. And this is new to Counter 5. In Counter 4, everything, all your metrics were counting total, which basically meant every click counted. And we all know the problems that was creating when, again, to focus on journal titles for a moment, you'd have those separate columns for HTML and PDF, and then the total of those combined, you could never tell, was that the same patron who clicked on the HTML and then the PDF? And so we'd really like to count that as one use, but we don't have any choice because we can't tell the difference, so it gets counted as two. So that's the difference essentially between total and versus unique, is within a given patron session, patron user session, the system is now distinguishing a unique investigation is for the content item itself, like the article, that any given user is trying to investigate or request full text. There's total and unique for requests and investigations. So total means like every time they're clicking on things, which would tend to produce a little bit of an overcount relative to what we probably have in mind in terms of what patrons are actually interested in. And unique really narrows that right down to, per user session. So, so here that basically, so item investigations can include viewing the abstract, but other actions as well, like even linking out to your link resolver, your interlibrary loan form, any kind of those sort of links, as well as the actual full text requests themselves also count as investigations. Okay, and there's there are a few that are, most of them are total item this, unique item that, but the couple that are total title this and unique title that specifically are books. So I just want to make that distinction because it's only the books that make the title versus item, and that's because of the whole problem of a whole book versus chapters of a book. Okay, so here's now the subset of the investigations that are the requests, the total item requests, the unique item requests. And so these are now what you were used to in Counter 4. This is the actual getting of the full text. And again, that third one, unique title requests, it says for example books, but really it's books. Okay, and I mentioned that there is a couple of other metrics that are typically in the platform and database reports that are kinds of searches, and they are this time compared to Counter 4, they are distinguishing automated from federated. Back in Counter 4, those were one category, automated and federated, and now you can actually tell the difference if you care. And so usually most of the time what you care about if you're paying attention to what your patrons are doing rather than specialty researchers or whatever, searches regular is what you think of as the kind of searches you most often want to count. Okay, and searches platform appears in the platform report. Okay, and then for the turnaways, there are these. This is the easy one. This has a direct one-to-one correspondence with Counter 4, where they had longer labels on them, but it was pretty obvious. One of them was, you know, blah, 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 no license, and blah, 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 limit exceeded. So the two different ways someone might be turned away from attempting to use a content but couldn't. By the way, these are always totals. There is no total versus unique in these. So these are every single click, even if it's the same user in the same session. Okay, so those are the metrics. So that's like the, you know, what it is the user's trying to do. The attributes are what about the documents as opposed to the user behavior. So here we go. And you'll see as we, you know, get further into the data that that you'll have these attributes, as the little message in the middle says, the standard views have canned subsets of the attributes, and then when you're dealing with the master reports, you can request custom master reports that have whatever subset combination you want as well. So there's data type, which you can see article, book segment, which would be like your chapters, and, you know, all of these other weird categories that probably don't come up too often. Section type is if you really wanted to distinguish book versus chapter. So that's most typically when that's used. YOP, I'll be talking, I think, a bit about what I might as well just jump into this one right now. This is a huge change between Counter 4 and Counter 5. Those of you who are familiar with the JR5 report in Counter 4, where you would, if you did the JR5, you'd get journal titles, so the titles of the journal, and there, instead of having the columns of the report, so you'd have one line per journal title for the given publisher. And then the columns would be, instead of being the months, January, February, like they were for all the other reports, the columns would be the year of publication for the usage in that journal. So, you know, in for your 2019 report, how many articles from 2019 were used in that journal? And then the next column would be 2018, and the next column would be 2017. So that's not when the user used it, it's the year of publication of the articles they used within the 2019 year of the data. In Counter 5, they decided that they really needed to provide that monthly breakdown. And since the columns now become the monthly breakdown, well, what do you do with the YOP that used to be the columns? And the answer to that was that they turned the YOP into rows. So instead of having one row per journal title, you now have multiple rows per journal title where each row represents the different YOP, and the columns are now January, February, March, April. So that may sound a little bit confusing, but and it's basically what it does is it forces everybody who wants to use this data to learn how to use pivot tables in their spreadsheets to recollapse that information. So, okay, access type. This is mostly, as you can see, there's 4 access types, but one is only repositories, and I haven't actually seen that implemented anywhere yet, because most of the big publishers are the first ones to become Counter 5 compliant anyway, not repositories. And then OA delayed isn't even really used yet. So it's mostly controlled versus OA gold, and of course the vast majority of our stuff is controlled, means our subscription. You can't get to it unless you've paid for, for access to it. And most of the standard views using this are specifically limited to controlled. But you can get the controlled and OA breakdown in the master reports. Okay, and then access method, as opposed to access type. Access method is just regular versus text data mining. So, and if you're in an institution that doesn't do special arrangements with the platforms to do text data mining projects, then all your data is going to be regular, and all the standard views are essentially defined as filtered down to regular. That's the key one most people care about. Okay, so I'm going to do some quick highlights comparing 4 to 5, and I've touched on some of this already, and then I'm going to get into more detail report type by report type. So all of the R4, Counter 4 reports were basically canned, and that's comparable to the R5 standard views. R5, as I described, suddenly added the whole concept of investigations, which goes beyond, shows patron interest beyond just literal full text. And this suddenly makes the R5 data really useful for your abstract and index databases like America History and Life and things like that don't have any full text, and were therefore the usage on them was completely invisible in counter compliance reports. So now suddenly we get metrics on our ANI databases that's meaningful. I talked already about the unique versus total, the fact that the entire item, the article level or article and multimedia object, I should say. So that's completely new to 5. And all of that granular attribute data that I just went through is new. And I mentioned also better, more meaningful data for books. Getting at really the issue of the chapter versus whole book usage is the item versus title, whether you're looking at investigations or requests. And what I just described about what they did with the YOP data presented per line, so you can see the monthly breakdown. So let's start getting into some of these more specific. I'm going to start with the easiest one, the platform report. Because of all these new metrics, there's no perfect conversion for any of these. So this is the closest we can come, is the old PR1, which had regular searches and searches federated and automated as a single metric. Essentially, you combine all of that into searches platform as a single metric. And the old Counter 4 had 2 metrics, record views and report clicks. And they're really, those don't have 2 different options or 2 different metrics now in Counter 5. They both count as total item investigations. And so my notes here are basically my notes for literally trying to convert this data. So if you're looking at a Counter 4 report and you were trying to literally convert it to Counter 5, the recommendation from Project Counter is that you basically look at the record views or the report clicks, and I assume you would want to look at the greater of them, and count that as your total item investigations, because there's no other way. The 2 metrics are otherwise too incompatible. And then specifically the PRP1 standard view from the PR master report. This shows you, now you've been through all of this attributes and metrics, you get a little bit of an idea. Among all of the metrics available, these are the ones that are built into the standard view: the searches platform, total item requests, unique item requests, and unique title requests. So you notice that the investigations is left out of the PRP1. So it was intended to be kind of like the PR1, only showing you the full text activity, not the other investigation activity. And the access method regular, so limiting out that text data mining activity. So database reports. So the old DB1 becomes the feeds into the DR master and the DRD1 standard view. And this one's a little bit simpler to convert. It has the same problem with the record views and report clicks as the platform does. And you can see there the DRD1 standard view for the DR master has these built-in filters, automated searches, federated searches, which are now two separate things, and searches regular, total item investigations, and total item requests. So the database view is now including some investigations as well as requests. So it's not all full text anymore. You'll notice, by the way, that in my notes on the above the where I say searches federated and automated equals searches automated, there's no, because those two, federated and automated, were combined into one single number in the old counter 4, there's no way to know, if you're trying to convert, how many of those were federated and how many of those were automated. But I'm not sure how much most librarians care. So my recommendation, if you're trying to do a literal conversion, is just stick it all into automated, and you'll have zeros on the federated in that data set, but that's all you can do. Okay, second database report, the DB2. So this also feeds into the DR master and the DRD2 standard view. This is a real easy one, because these are the access denied blah, blah, blah is the counter 4 metric, is the limit exceeded, and the second one, not licensed, is the no license metric. That one became nice and easy. And the metric types and report filters on the standard view, the DRD2 is nice and obvious. And again, filtering to the regular to leave out the text and data mining. Now we get into the title reports. This is the big stuff. I'll do the books first and then the journals. And everything in the next several slides all feeds into one single title master report that includes books and journals. So let's start off with the BR1 and BR2. The BR1 was your whole book metric in counter 4, which then becomes your unique title requests in the TRB1. And TRB2 was your chapter data in counter 4. That becomes still in TRB1. It's the same standard view, but those are the total item requests as opposed to the unique title requests. And then here I show you what the filters are off of the metric, off of the master report. So you're, again, total item requests and unique title requests. So again, your standard view TRB1 is a combination of your old BR1, BR2, and is filtered down to only full text, so no investigation data in this one. And then you've got the report filters, data type book, access type controlled, so it's leaving out the OA. And in fact, where I have book requests excluding OA gold is the official name of the TRB1 standard view, and then access method regular, leaving out the text data mining stuff. There is a new I'll get to TRB2 in the next slide, but there's a new report that's TRB3, which doesn't have an equivalent in counter 4, which includes the investigation as well as full text, that is requests, metrics, and includes the and it's method regular again and type book, but it also gives you the breakdown of OA versus controlled. So if you want your book data, not counting the turnaways, this is your actual usage data. If you want it more fully broken down, you'd want to use the B3 instead of the B1. And then here's what was BR3 was your turnaway report for books, and that becomes the TRB2 in counter 5. This one's very simple, and I've covered this in the other examples with the limit exceeded, no license, limited to data type book, regular access. Okay, now the journals. So just like the book reports, everything's feeding into one single TR master report, and now we've got 4 standard views, the J1, J2, J3, and J4. So the JR1 in counter 4 only had one metric, which was the total item, corresponds basically pretty well to the total item requests in the J1. And this is where you couldn't tell the difference between whether it was the same person or different people looking at the HTML versus PDF. That's your total item request in counter 5. And then as you can see, the J1 is again limiting to the requests, so not the investigations. So it's not giving you those abstract whatever views. And again, the report filters, it's excluding the OA, so it's only controlled journals, regular, not text data mining. The J3, like with the B3, had no counter 4 equivalent. This is the one that is just like J1, except it includes the OA gold and it includes the investigations. So it's a little more detail if you're interested in beyond just the straight out full text uses. And then the JR2 was your turnaways, and that corresponds, again, just like the BR3 to B2, very simple and obvious. You have your no license versus limit exceeded, and that corresponds pretty cleanly from 4 to 5. And there you go. Okay, and then this is something I talked about a bit more before, so I maybe won't say all this again, but the JR5 was your YOP. Your TRJ4 is your YRP report, except you've got separate rows per title with the YOP breakdown as a column along with all the other monthly columns. And so your JR5 metrics, because it only had essentially reporting period total per YOP, you didn't have the monthly breakdown. So the JR5 individual metrics correspond to the reporting period total. And if people want, I can quickly pull up a sample of this. You can see what it is I'm talking about here. So you need to pivot on that. And then there are the built-in filters. So those also exclude OA if you're using the standard view, J4. So there you go. Important note, if you're retrieving the master reports, the TR master report, just by default without choosing specialty settings, you won't get the YOP breakdown in the master report. Every vendor that's properly compliant should provide the option to select attributes, to filter and to break down the data on. I know a couple that are supposedly compliant that don't, but most are compliant that do. So that if you do want your master report broken down by YOP, you can. Now, what ends up happening is because every time you break down by different attributes and by different metrics and by YOP, you could end up with 30 lines per title, per journal title in your title master report, because you've got all the different combinatoric combinations of metric attribute and for the 2019 articles and metric attribute for the 2018 articles and for however many years all your patrons ended up using of your holdings in that journal. So if you're going to get into doing that, be ready to do a lot of pivoting. Okay, I actually went through that pretty fast, but I think it's because I did want to, have lots of time for questions and possibly pulling up some sample reports and things if you'd like that. And I want to just throw up these couple of links that would lead. They're on the verge of releasing the Module 2 journals manual. We're kind of beta testing it right now internally, but that will be coming soon. And then there's these wonderful friendly guides and what they call the foundation classes, which are the video tutorials also on the Project Counter site. So that was a lot, and now I would like to open it up to all your questions, and Cynthia's going to help me manage this.
Thank you very much, Melissa. That definitely was a lot of information. But I'm sure there's probably questions out there. If you want to ask verbally, just unmute, or you can type your question in the chat, or if you have comments. I myself would be interested in seeing some examples, because I'm one of those visual learners. If I see the example, it makes more sense to me. But I open it up to others as well to ask their questions or make comments.
Okay, and I just pulled up in my shared screen. I had set up a folder ready to show you all of our 2019 Wiley reports as examples. They don't support the IR, so it's all of them except the IR, but I could go find another folder for someone who does if people want to see that. The IR is still a little bit of a mess because at an item level, you have not only, you know, sort of the item title, which would literally be the article title, and then the article author, but then you've got the what they call the parent or containing. So you've got, which you may or may not choose to display depending whether you're selecting it or not, which would be then the corresponding journal title for the where the article comes from. And so that's still a little unstable right now in the counter world, but I could show you an example if you like. So are there
any
questions
out there, or do folks just would like to start seeing some of the examples?
Or if you want me to go back to a slide, you know, or a couple of slides, let me know too.
Nothing yet. I'd be interested if you could just show us some examples, because
sure,
I'd really like to see them.
Okay, so I mean, so the first thing to realize, let me minimize that for a moment, is, you know, I went through all of that. You know, compare this to what you were used to. You had PR1, DB1, DB2, you know, BR1, 2, and 3, and JR1, 2, 3, and 4. You can add up how much that is. This is now, you know, all of, plus the 3 IRs, the IR master, IR article, and IR multimedia. There's more of them now. If you include the master reports, are just the 2-letter ones, and the standard views are the ones that have the underscore and then the longer designation. So I can just start with, this is the platform master report, and this is what it looks like. And so you can see, like, for instance, for, you know, Cochrane, you got the monthly. There's nothing more exciting out here, so I won't keep scrolling sideways. It's the months, but you can see now where you've got unique item requests, total item requests, unique item investigations, total item investigations, and because this is a platform report, the search is platform. And I have to admit, I do not understand, even looking at it myself, why Wiley is giving me 2 different rows for the searches platform. I think that's probably an error. But that's, yeah, Wiley's one of the late, they didn't even start seriously coming up until September, although they went back and converted, but that gives you an idea of what's going on in terms of how all these different metrics end up turning into different lines for the same database platform, whatever it is. Okay, let me, and then
Melissa, there was a question in the chat
okay.
From Allison. She was wondering if you could demonstrate extracting the JR5 metric from the new R5 journal report.
Okay, so yeah, everybody likes that pivot table stuff. Okay, so now I realize I'm in LibreCalc, which I use for looking at these things, but I'm not sure I remember how to do a pivot table in it. I hope it's going to be easy. So let me kind of bring this in, and I'm just, you know what, all these columns are like not really relevant, so I'm going to just hide them all. So you can see what I mean about in the J4, which is as close as you can come to the JR5, suddenly we've got not just 1 line per journal title. First of all, you'd have 2 in any case because you've got the total versus unique metrics. But for each of those, you now have, this is the data for the 1996, the 2002, the 2004, the 2006. By the way, I should have mentioned another difference between 4 and 5 generally is that in 4, the publishers, the platforms were supposed to include all the titles, even if you had 0 usage. In 5, they're specifically not supposed to include the 0 usage, which is why we don't see 96, 97, 98, 99 to that, you know, all of the years for academic emergency medicine. We must have had, at UPEI, we must have had nobody use any of the articles from 97, 98 through 2001 because there's no lines for them, and you don't ever give a reporting total of 0 in Counter 5. So you can see what ends up happening here. So what I'm going to do is, actually, just to keep things easy, I'm going to make a quick copy so that I can mess up my heading, because whenever I do pivots and stuff like that, I want my column headers to be the very first line. It just makes life easier. Okay, and so basically you'd want to pivot on these, and yeah, I'm sorry, I'm doing this in LibreOffice. Let's hope there it is. Pivot table, create, current selection. And so I want the titles in the rows, and I'd want the if you actually don't care, reporting period total would be my data. And if you're happy to see it collapse, I'm trying to think about if you actually really want to put the like make a true JR5, then you're putting the YOP into the columns. That's going to be a nasty mess. But we can try it and see. Let's see. I'm looking for filters. If anybody knows on LibreOffice how to filter to a certain metric type, because what I'm going to end up getting is I'm going to get the totals and the uniques added up together, which is not really what I want. So maybe what I actually do when I've been working on this stuff is let's see, sort data, sort. Oh, sorry, this came up on the other side here. Range includes column labels and sort criteria metric type. Okay, what I often do is I will, because I like to work, to me, unique item requests is one of the most wonderful things about Counter. If you're trying to compare to the old one, you'd want to use the total item request. But if you want, what your goal is to get the best reality of what your patrons actually care about, is then you want the unique ones. So I'm just going to come in and take out all the total ones. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Come back to the top. So now because I made a copy. So now I only have the unique ones in there. So all my data should be, see, it's pretty awful because you got all the columns that correspond to all the years that any of them used, right? And you probably don't care as much about the older years. So anyway, so this is how you would now create something, except the reporting period total is way out in the end. But this is now how you've got for your unique item requests, which is your unique full text usages by year of publication. That's how you do it. And those of you who are used to Excel, the pivot tables work basically the same. Did that? Allison, sorry, didn't mean to throw you a curveball. I should have been prepared for that, really. And if I open any more of them like this, I'll make a point of opening it in Excel. But did you got the idea? Did that kind of answer your question?
Melissa, yep. This is Linda from UMB. I think you said something along the lines of if a journal title doesn't have any use in that year or period of years, it wouldn't show up in the list. Is that what you said, or did I mishear you?
Yes, both, and the specifics depends on which report type you were talking about. But let me go ahead and just save that. Yes, so if you're talking about like a normal TRJ1, for instance, that already has, only 2 lines per title. It has the unique and the total metrics. That's why 2 lines. If the reporting period total for both of those metrics is 0, then the title won't show up in the report at all. If it has like investigations but no requests, you'll get 1 line, and if it has investigations and requests, you'll get 2 lines. So I was talking about it in the context here of the YOP, but where it's the individual years that'll be missing for that title. But yes, that's true across, like, even an entire database. If somehow you had a database that didn't get used once in the entire year, then that database won't be listed on the database report for that year. So it won't say this database 0. It just won't be there at all. And that's true across all of the reports, standard views and master.
And there's not a way we can make a change to make it show up. I'm just thinking of these long tails. When we have a large list of journals, we like to see how long the 0 tail is, or at least I do. And then you sometimes go in, you're looking for a specific title in the collection and you can't find it, but you think there's an error. or maybe you haven't been providing access like you thought you were. And so this could be a little bit problematic for some of the ways I look at the reports. But I thank you for pointing that out because I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I've been through every granular option. I mean, so the thing is, I can't say whether there's any vendor out there who doesn't throw that in as an extra option, but it's not counter standard. So the counter standard allows vendors to literally extend the standard to add their own custom stuff. They have to meet the minimum requirements of the standard, but then they can add extra stuff if they want. So I have not noticed yet any major vendor that has made that like an extra checkbox option, but it's definitely not part of the R5 standard. So sorry, no, I know what you mean about it was actually nice to see the zeros to remind you that, yeah, all that stuff is in that database or platform or collection, and just nobody's using all this stuff. But I'm afraid you're going to have to go to some other list, like your entitlements list or some other list from the vendor, and then do a VLOOKUP cross tabulation between the more complete list and the usage data report.
Okay, thanks, Melissa.
So two comments on this from the chat, and then a different question. So Allison responded that you have to use the publisher's title list for the what Linda's trying to do, and that's what I think what you were just mentioning. But Allison also said the reason titles with no use don't show up is because counter data is based on server logs. If a journal is not used, it will not show up in the server log. So that was just an extension of.
Interesting, right? As compared to the counter 4 data that wasn't based on server logs.
I have no idea.
Yeah, no, but it's an interesting point. I don't know what each specific. By the way, I should also mention that there are a handful of companies and a lot of our big publishers and small publishers that are contracting with these specific companies to manage this for them. The top company names are Atipon, Scholarly IQ, LibLinks, and Sheridan Pub Factory. There might be another one I'm forgetting, but those are the biggest ones I know about. Now, a lot of our publishers and vendors are doing it themselves, but a lot of them are contracting with one of these companies to actually do the reports for them. So that's something, if you've ever noticed, if you get these things and you've ever noticed that you suddenly get like 10 notices all on May 4th that all say that counter 5 for April is now available, and then like 3 days later you get a different set, that's because that's a little bit of a clue that everybody in that batch that came all at the same time are probably like Atipon customers. So that's what's going on there.
Okay, so Melissa, in the chat we had from J Morris 9 at UMB. Hi Melissa, I'm a new collections analysis librarian, and off the top of your head, do you know of any resources that map the changes between CO4 and CO5, so counter 4 and counter 5 reports?
Yeah, the Project Counter website is the official go-to place for all of this. And actually, if you hold on just a second, what I'm going to do is pop over there in my other window and then drag it over to this one. Release code of practice. Most of the release code of practice is written for the vendors to figure out how to convert their data, but it can often be useful. So there's your like transitioning from counter 4 to counter 5, which kind of explains some of what I was trying to summarize for you in a more human readable way in the slides. But so 13.3 in the code of practice. So so I had back in my last slide, I had the link to kind of the top of code of practice 5, and this is section 13 inside that. So I think this is what you're asking for, that the metric in BR1, the R5 equivalent, is this combination of this metric plus these attribute filters applied.
Yeah, so. And Julie Morris, who's the new collections analysis librarian at UMB. Welcome, Julie, to your first webinar with us. She says thank you, that's exactly what she was looking for.
Okay, great.
And Allison followed up on her comment about the server logs to say R4 data also had absent titles for things that did not get used. And she says she learned that the hard way.
that your 4 data did?
Yeah.
Oh, it had absent, meaning sometimes missing. Oh, right. Okay, that's possible. I have seen, you know, working on the software project that I'm going to be presenting tomorrow, I have gone through Counter 5 and Counter 4 with an absolute fine-tooth comb, literally cell by cell in reports from lots of different vendors, and I am shocked and horrified how many vendors who claim to be compliant aren't perfectly compliant, and even little things like formatting the date in you know, MMDDYY instead of YYYMMDD, or but in bigger things like this, like, you know, not following the rules for including or not including zero use titles and stuff. So there's a lot of non-compliance out there. But so what I'm teaching you is the official standard.
There's another question in the chat. We've been using Counter 4 interface usage and ebook title usage for total numbers of usage. Is the total numbers in Counter 5 the same? I'm hearing that the main benefits of Counter 5 is the more granular usage data. Thanks.
Okay, so basically your for every, as I'm looking at the chart I've got up over here, with the exception of the BR1, you'll find that the Counter 4 usage, oh, you're saying interface usage, which I guess would be database or platform, and the ebook title usage. So your BR1 whole book usage in Counter 4 actually does correspond to the unique title request. So that's the one that is unique rather than total. But all the others that are your title level usage numbers correspond to the total item request. So when you say, is the total numbers in Counter 5 the same? In theory, your BR2 numbers should correspond to your total item requests exactly. But I have seen, again, some instances looking at specific reports that they're not always, but in theory they ought to be. And the same thing if I go down to the J1s, right, that you remember you had all of these, you had your total full text, your HTML, and your PDF. That corresponds to your total item requests. But what you probably want in the second half of your comment is the more granular usage. When it comes to the journal articles, what everybody was really begging for is what turned into the unique item requests, which of course the whole point was that it didn't have a corresponding Counter 4 equivalent. That's why we were desperate for it. So yeah, if you're trying to compare apples and apples between Counter 4 and Counter 5, in the case of the journals, make sure you're looking at the total item request, not the unique item requests.
Any other questions or comments, chat or verbal?
Is there anything else you want to see? Some more reports or go back to any slides? I could pull up a report in Excel this time if someone wanted it.
Is there a particular report somebody wants to see?
So here's like the J1 as compared to last time I showed you the J4. So you can see the J1 only has 2 lines per title, the unique item and the total item. Now you expect that the total item will always be greater than or equal to the unique item. If you ever see a case where it's the other way around, that's not compliant with the standard and should be reported to either the vendor or to Project Counter.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Have you found a good way around the problem of master reports getting too large to open in Excel? Yes, that's the thing I'm showing tomorrow. So you can put all your master reports into an SQL database and then query it. And I'll be showing the tool tomorrow. That's the only way around it is if Excel can't handle it, it can't handle it. You've got to switch to using database software instead of spreadsheet software. And so, I mean, if you're a whiz at Microsoft Access, go ahead and use Microsoft Access. That's what you're going to need to do because it's just, yeah. And the item master report, because it's at the article level instead of the journal title level, can just be unbelievably huge. Yeah.
So that's the webinar tomorrow at 2 p.m. Atlantic that Melissa will also be doing. The RSVP link was in the announcement that was sent out. It's also on the CAAL website in the webinar section if you want to RSVP for tomorrow's session at 2 p.m. where Melissa is going to demonstrate or demo the new Sushi Counter 5 report harvesting tool that they've created at UPEI, the open source tool. I hope I got that right.
Yeah. I'm now calling it, because they've added some new features to it, I'm now calling it harvesting, managing, and analyzing. Because it does a little bit more than just simply, originally it was going to just collect them for you and stick all of the TSV files into a folder, and now it does a lot more than that. So I'll get to see it if you come tomorrow. Do anybody want to see any more of the other kinds of reports? I mean, just start to open more, and I'll open them up in Excel. Excel always takes just a little bit longer than LibreOffice, but so here is a the BR3 is the B3, like the J3 is the one that's kind of like the one except more granular. So again, you're seeing more lines per title because it's going to break things down into the access type and the investigation metrics, as well as the I guess nobody actually got into the full text of that one. I'm just seeing investigations on that title. But if I come down further, find one that's got more lines, you can see you can see the requests and the investigations, total and unique, for this one journal title for 2019. So, oh, sorry, this is a book title. I'm in the book report. Sorry, B3. So that's why there's only one YOP, because the book only has 1 year of publication. And then, of course, all your actual reporting period data is out there.
Any other questions or comments, concerns?
Just want to see some more reports. Say something. I'm happy to keep going.
There were a lot of when we sent out the original RSVP announcement about the webinar, there were some links to resources on the counter site that you might want to go to get a little bit more to work your way through understanding it. This is a quick overview, but there are a lot more tools available for you to get more familiar with Counter 5 and also Counter 4 if you wanted to be able to compare the two.
And given our previous discussion and the fact that you're going to be providing everybody the slide deck separately from the recording, I thought, let me just go ahead and add this additional link in there. So these become clickable, right? When you share the slide deck, it's not like just a flat PDF.
Yeah. No, they're clickable.
So, yeah. I just
1 second. Let's see. So Sierra is asking something in the chat.
Okay.
Did you want to read it, or I'll read it out loud? Because
sure, for everybody.
Accessibility. Just to confirm, unique request is per session for the user. If that journal was accessed again by that user later in the day, month, it would count as unique again, correct?
Yes, definitely, because unless the person happens to be logging into like a personal account within that platform, the system would never know it's the same user, right? I suppose they could be playing games with cookies, but they don't. So, and actually, since you raised the issue, just to complicate things a little bit, the definition of a session in Counter 5 gave some of the platforms vendors a bit of a wiggle room. Some of them weren't using cookies and stuff to maintain a sense of a single user session. And so what some of them are allowed to do is to have a fixed period of time, like every hour on the hour, for example. Everything is considered a new session. So there might be a little bit of overcounting. So if you imagine someone's reading an ebook and at 11:55, they're in the platform reading it online in the web browser. At 11:55, they read chapter 4, and that's now counting as a unique title request. And they keep reading it. And then 12:01, they move to chapter 5 and start reading that. In theory, that should be part of the same unique title request because it's the same book. but because they rolled over across the artificial boundary of what defines a session, it now counts as a second title, unique title request. Not all publishers do that, and unfortunately, they haven't provided anywhere visibly a list of who's doing what, who's maintaining true sessions and who's doing artificial time rollover sessions, and what their time rollover periods are. But that is, in theory, something that could be happening. If you ever tried to do your own super controlled test and you said, hey, wait a minute, this is overcounting, that might be what's going on.
Thanks for that, Melissa.
That's an extra little.
Any other observations you've noticed while doing your Counter 5 analysis? Is there any tricks or things to note that we'd be aware of like this?
This has been the big stuff. I've also noticed that there are, if you're getting into playing with this stuff in, Access or whatever, everybody should be providing all reports in UTF-8 to get all of the, different foreign language characters and stuff like that. I've had a few that had characters that broke my software and make me, even despite being UTF-8, my software being UTF-8 compliant, which makes me think that they may be getting into UTF-16 or something like that. So just be kind of on the lookout. Also, a tip on that is Excel is really horrible for when you open up a TSV file of not defaulting to UTF-8 unless the file has what's called a BOM character, is the very first character. It's a hidden character at the very first character of the file, which Counter actually explicitly says don't include. So you might have noticed when I opened up in LibreOffice that it immediately opened up a dialog that gave me a chance to verify that I wanted this thing opened up in UTF-8 character set, whereas Excel doesn't do that. So just a plug for LibreOffice for you then for dealing with with Counter TSV files. Is you'll have less trouble with the non-Latin, non-Romance character sets.
So there's Sabrina has a question in the chat. What is the most common error that has to be compensated for in order to get accurate counting in C5 as opposed to C4?
Do you mean on the publisher side or us interpreting the data? Compensated by whom?
I assume compensated on our end. Okay.
Well, it's going to, interpreting. Okay, so it's going to vary depending on which report you're in. Like I said, the turnaways are straight across. Those are the easiest ones. The no license limit exceeded. Nothing needs to be compensated at all. I wouldn't call anything else an error. It's just a change in the definition of the metrics and attributes. So, but in terms of an error that we're most likely to make in terms of our understanding, or like the interpreting, as you say, might be looking at the R4 data and then looking at the unique requests in the R5 and then expecting them to match. The unique is wonderful because it tells us what the patrons really cared about. But you will find if you start looking at comparing your R5 data to your R4 for the same titles, everything drops a lot because you're suddenly not counting every single click as a separate view. You're only counting per patron, per object, whether it be the article or the book or the book chapter only gets counted once instead, and you start to realize how much patrons don't know what they're doing, and they click around and click back and click on the same thing again, and because they're kind of confused or lost or navigating in maybe non-efficient ways through these platforms. And that was creating a whole lot of overcounting of what their real intent was in R4. And that's what the unique data fixes for you in R5. So I don't know if that is what you meant. But I mentioned along the way a couple of the other maybe less common things like that the search is automated, federated, being collapsed versus broken out in different situations and things like that. And always the, whether you're breaking out the OA versus controlled access in different reports where, in R4, they were combined into single numbers, whereas now they're broken out. So like your most important standard views are probably the J1 and the B1 for journals and books. And both of those deliberately limit out the OA, whereas your R4s would have, I believe, had the OA in them. So you'd see drops in those as well. I don't know. Is that answering your question? Any interface manipulations that vendors can use? I'm reading Alice's question. To play the system. That's like, you know, whether when you follow a link to an article, whether you're dropped off at the abstract versus dumped straight onto the HTML full text. So there's going to be a certain amount of that, I guess. But the whole point of all of these total versus uniques are is intended to limit the result, the impact of those kinds of interface design issues. In terms of what the metrics actually mean. The totals are kind of, you might think of the totals and the investigations are serious free-for-alls. There's been a lot of discussion inside the technical advisory committee of Counter as to all kinds of things that count as total investigations. So, I mean, patrons doing almost anything back and forth counts as another total item investigation. That's why, you know, if you really want to understand what your patrons care about, stick to the unique ones rather than the total ones. So it's, R5 seems to have thwarted as much as is possible. Yeah. Yeah.
And Sabrina had another question up there. So it was a sort of response to your earlier response. I was wondering how the computer code changes had directly changed how the provided data becomes more/less difficult to interpret.
The computer code changed how the provided. I'm not sure what she means by the computer code.
So, and Sabrina, you might wish to actually contact Melissa directly, because that way you can sort of go into more detail in what exactly you're asking about.
By computer code, did you mean the project counter standard? Yes. Oh, okay. So, yeah, well, I mean, for the most part, it's made things more complicated than in that in almost every single report, including your basic CAN standard views. As you saw me showing you before, you typically will have 2 lines, not 1 per title. Like you saw when I made the copy of the J1 in order to do the J5 to do the pivot on it. That I immediately, you know, I copied it, did a sort to remove all the total ones so I could have just the unique ones in the report to work with. So in that sense, it's added a couple of extra steps. So it's kind of like everything in life, you trade off complexity for power, right? So Counter 5, much more than Counter 4, has gone favoring power in exchange for making life a little more complex. It's given you a lot more granularity of power over what data you actually want. But that does mean you either need to use a tool that's going to do it for you, or you need to brush up on your pivot table skills and your spreadsheet skills, because the power means complexity and the complexity falls on you.
Well, thank you, Melissa. We're at 2:03, so I'm cognizant that people probably have other things to move on to. And thank you. Just a reminder to everybody, I will, as soon as I receive the slide deck from Melissa, and then also get the webinar processed, I will put it up hopefully later this afternoon, and I'll send out a message to everybody to let you know when it's up there, or when they're both up there. So thank you, Melissa. This has been fantastic.
You're very welcome.
We're really looking forward to your session tomorrow. To see how we can actually manipulate this data.
I hope many of you can join us and will like what you see. You're all very welcome. If anyone, I don't know if Cynthia can stay on. If anyone wants to stay on a little bit longer, I'm free. I'm free for the next hour. If anyone wants to stay around for further, you know, advanced questions or demos or whatever, I'm happy to stay on, but don't want everybody else to feel the need to stay. Cynthia, you okay for another half hour or so?
I'm fine. I'm still here.
Okay, I'm just going to keep sharing the screen then, just in case. Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and pop over to, oops. Cynthia, that first one, Exector, is that who I should share the slide deck with?
Yep. I'm just looking to see. Folks are, I'll see in a second.
If anybody's left.
Now exiting.
Hi, Melissa, it's Linda again. I was wondering if you've noticed any trends, like if we're looking at 3 years worth of usage stats, 2017, 2018, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And counter 5 is in 2019. Have you noticed any sort of trend of whether the numbers are going up or going down? That's a pretty general question, but.
So for that question to be meaningful, I assume you'd be talking about comparing the total item requests to the R4, the only metric there is, like the, or perhaps the full text total,
yes,
combining the
total. Yes,
full, yeah, because they always gave you that HTML and PDF breakouts, which was useless because you couldn't tell how many of those were the same person versus a different person.
Yeah, we just tend to go with the totals.
I have found, so I've actually done a lot of that side-by-side comparison. It totally varies by vendor. Some of them I find that number ends up being exactly the same. Because there was an overlap period, January through April of 2019, where you were getting the counter 4 and 5 from this for the exactly the same data period from the same vendor. So I was looking at some of those to see those if there was any patterns, like they literally changed how their servers were counting even stuff that should be the same. And for a lot of them, I was seeing exactly the same number, which is good, which is what you'd want to see.
Right.
But there were some that were going up, comparing the total item requests to the R4, and some that were going down. So it does seem like a lot of them seriously rebuilt the server side stuff. So I'm afraid for the most part, I would say it's going down across the board, but it's going to vary widely by individual platform. But
Yeah.
like for instance, we have in our collections policy that an approximate rubric that when we're looking at our new budget and we have to cancel things because we're not getting enough money to pay for everything, that $10 per full text use for a full text product would be our cutoff point for seriously further investigating that thing for cancellation. And with the new R5 data, we have to change that because now the numbers are dropping so low that almost, things that were like $5 or $6 or $7 per full text use and not falling in that threshold with the unique requests are now, $15, $20 per full text use, per unique full text use. So if you've got those kind of metrics in house, you might want to rethink those thresholds across the board, because that is, but again, that's comparing the R4 to the unique, not the total.
Yeah, well, it's sort of the full text journals, and not all of the 2019 are counter 5. So I'm trying to keep track of that. But anyways, Julie's going to be helping with this, thankfully. The second question I have, do you have any idea what a document delivery cost is roughly in Canada now? And it's a very broad question, but if you have any insight.
I'm totally the wrong person to ask that.
Okay.
That's not a counter question. And I'm not the
fine.
ILL person. Does anybody else who's still in here involved with ILL have any idea? No, you might want to ask Cynthia if she can post that onto the document delivery CAAL listserv. Right?
Okay, that might be,
because they have one. So
right, yeah, send it on to me, Linda.
The literature is showing that if you cancel a journal title, they're not going to document delivery anyway. That's what the literature is saying. But I've lost track of what it costs completely. Not even talking about US versus Canada. I just have no idea now, and thought maybe I'd ask the question on this session.
Well, it's interesting, Linda. It's a good question to ask. We don't pay anything anymore with the Cross Canada deal, except for U of T. So remember, we recently got rid of that $5 fee.
That's right, we did. Yeah.
Oh, so are you talking about hard costs, like actual having to pay someone, as opposed to soft costs, including, all your ILL staff amortized across all of your requests for the year?
I'd be open to either. I mean, basically, I know very little about this, and I had forgotten that we're not charging in Canada anymore because I don't work with document delivery. But I know there used to be articles, way back. And then when we were talking about cancellations maybe 4 or 5 years ago, people said, oh, well, our document delivery would be overrun. We'd have to hire more staff, and would we be saving any money, and yada, yada, yada. And then research came out a few years later saying, well, they're not going to document delivery. That was a surprise to me. It really was. And
have you done that analysis in-house for yourself? Because
no,
I have.
we haven't done a big any cancellation projects to that degree that we need to worry about that. What did you find? Are you willing to share?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's all idiosyncratic because we're small, right? But
Right.
every time we've canceled, so I'm even though I'm not the direct ILL person because I'm the collections and electronic resources person, I have access to the granular ILL data, and I can pull the reports myself. And every year I do it, and I look at what were the titles that were most commonly requested, aside from the Wall Street Journal, which we cannot afford to pay for the online of.
I hear you.
Every single year, that one, we literally don't have any other titles that are double digits. Like, I mean, not a single one, and including, so over the years we've canceled some pretty we tend to pick, again, we were working on a cost per full text use threshold basis, which tended to knock out all the super expensive chemistry and physics type journals, the $10,000 journals. So we don't have any of those left, and that aren't in the big deal packages. And so I'd be watching it, say, okay, this journal had like 300 uses a year, but because it was costing us $15,000, it still was way above the threshold on a cost per use basis. And then I'd look at, the next year, the next 2 years at the ILL data, and it would be single digit request uses on it. So yeah, our experience absolutely validates what you're seeing in the professional literature of other people's studies about it. And this comes back to the concept of satisficing, right?
I hear you.
The other thing we did do, though, is a year and a half ago, we did a survey of our faculty, asking them if they're using other accounts that they have still live with other institutions to get things either that we don't have or we do have. And we got, I think, about 60 responses, and almost everybody who bothered to out of a faculty of over 200. And I think of everybody who bothered to respond was responding because they wanted to say, hey, yes. And many of them were saying they had maintained some other affiliation with some larger university. And it was very sad when some of them in the comments section would say that since we don't have enough in their area, they don't even bother checking us first. They check the other university first. So they don't even know if some of the stuff they're using we happen to already have anyway. So that would be something that you might want to do too, is that kind of, I'd be happy to send you it was a Google form survey if you want to see the questions we asked and everything.
That's interesting. But how many faculty, after they come here, they would maybe have come to UMB or come to PEI, would they only have access for about a year, and then they should be being cut off from the previous?
And no? Some of them would admit in the comments things like, well, they have a good friend back at U of T or whatever, we even asked them about things like ResearchGate and Sci-Hub, and a lot of them admitted to using ResearchGate. I don't think anybody actually admitted to Sci-Hub, but a whole lot in academia, or is that what it's called? Yeah, academia.edu. A lot of them said they used those, and some of them were saying they were using that before they'd even bother to check our holdings. So the drop in ILL usage after you cancel something might not be that they don't care about that content, just that they found other ways to get it that don't involve the library.
If you're working together on a project in different institutions, you sort of say, well, I'm working in the same project, it's definitely okay. But I've kind of wondered how I mean, there's sharing of resources and all this kind of stuff, and we're allowed to do it via copyright and all this. But I'm just starting to wonder how the publishers are going to start to view this as we start to cut, particularly since COVID-19. I mean, I think that there's going to be a huge shift after this. I'm sitting on the fence as to whether this could be good or bad, but I just can't imagine the different directions we can go in. But I think there will be a change, and document delivery has serviced us at UMB very well. We've got an excellent department, and the turnaround time is very quick for a journal. And that seems to be where people want the material. So I'm thinking, well, why would you go to another university? But if you're working on a research project and you're both sharing information, then you're popping information back and forth. You don't even really think about the usage at the library or what the bigger picture is, because you're just doing your research.
Right. Yeah. I can imagine that there might be some psychological dimensions to the faculty member in the smaller institution versus the bigger being embarrassed to ask the other one to get the article for them, but maybe not. I've never been inside one of those, especially science-based research project, to find out what the social psychological dynamic that's going on between people at very different size universities are. That would be an interesting study for a sociology professor to do.
Yeah, I had never thought of it personally myself. I would be thinking that if they're working together, but yeah, there's prestige in where you're working and all that. I just can't imagine that it's getting into that fine area. But as you say, it would be an excellent research topic.
It would be kind of fun. And I don't think there's any question at all that among researchers across different institutions within the same research project, within our license agreements or anything else, I don't think anybody would question them sharing an article inside their research group.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Just to go back to your question, Linda, about hard costs, just a note I know of many of our members since COVID and all of its impact. Many have turned to getting their articles from reprints desk as opposed to the regular ILL process, because people aren't really supplying potentially. So that actually may have, they'll be interesting to see if they continue to use services like that once the libraries start reopening and doing document delivery, because a lot of folks had shut down their document delivery. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that, because they do charge that additional copyright cost that you may not have faced when you were doing ILL.
Yeah, and new habits are being, created every day, and we could prefer one over the other.
Yes,
and it's hard to say where the changes are going to come. I don't know if we're using reprints or not, but thank you for mentioning it, because I can check with document delivery. I don't think we're struggling right now, but I don't know. I also can't say how many requests we're getting.
Yeah, I know a lot of our members, at least a few of them, the bigger ones, had said that they were using reprints desks significantly because they couldn't get them from anybody else because everybody was closed.
Right. So reprints desk or just reprints?
Reprints desk is the name of the provider.
We use reprints desk, but I don't think we use it much because we're much more undergraduate than you are. I mean, obviously we have some graduate programs, but we don't have all the humanities and social science PhDs. So people satisfice a lot more. If they can't get to the full text immediately, they just give up and find something else.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's
on the undergraduate side.
You guys have the veterinarian collection.
Oh my God, yes. And they are by far our heaviest users across everything, including print books, by far. But they also have the biggest cross-institutional research partnerships too, which means that they also may be getting things other ways.
True.
So.
Well, I appreciate this session very much, Melissa. We'll see you on the next one. I think the next one will be a little bit more over my head, and Julie will be joining us. So maybe she'll be showing me some things after the fact, but I'm glad you offered this session first, because the move from Counter 4 to Counter 5, I kept asking myself, can we make comparisons between one report to another, or should we be flagging it, putting that number in bold, saying this is Counter 5, and really making sure everybody was aware of it when we look at numbers. So you've answered quite a bit of my questions here.
Good. I was going to say, do you feel like you're walking away with your concerns about that answered as to clarity as to what you can and can't do, even if the answer wasn't, oh yeah, don't worry, everything's perfectly compatible?
I think I haven't really looked at enough reports. We're just really sitting down looking at a number of reports, and I have to say that we have not been in the forefront of looking at systematic usage stats across the board. We've been kind of handpicking, trying to decide what we're going to cancel, what we're going to keep, trading off. So we don't have a system. We've had a system, but it hasn't been used. And now with Julie in place, we're going to be moving in the direction we probably should have been doing a couple of years ago. But
so I would recommend, if you've got like a handful of particular vendors, like maybe some big deal packages that you're specially focused on making actual decisions rather than just curiosity about what's happening, then go back to 2019 and if that platform still allows you to do it, run the 4 and the 5 reports on specifically January through April of 2019. Those are the months that everybody's supposed to be doing a perfect overlap on. And then look at those so that you can get a feel if that platform, the total item requests do or don't mirror the R4 numbers equivalents. And then you can look at the entire year's worth of data and know which direction that it's going in. That would be my best suggestion on that. Yeah. Oh, by the way, one other for people who use EBSCO, which is almost everybody for databases, I think. EBSCO actually went back and did a backwards conversion back to at least 2018, and I want to say maybe even further back than that. So you can't get the R4 reports from EBSCO's platform anymore. They'll only give you the 5 because they are fully complying with giving you multiple years back entirely on 5. So if you want to trust their conversions, how they chose to convert their old data, then you will find that when you can't go back and get the, but if you saved them somewhere else, on your own all these years, then you might still be able to dig up their old R4 reports from where you saved them. But that's the only vendor I know. There are a couple other vendors that went, like everybody who uses Atipon has back to for some reason, November of 2018 is when they start providing Counter 5 data. So you could actually get November of 2018 through April of 2019 overlapping in theory, if you wanted just those extra 2 months, so that you'd have 6 months worth instead of 4. But
that's interesting. I didn't know that about EBSCO had already taken their numbers and switched them over to Counter, because we have looked at the past 2 years, and of course we've been saying they need to provide more than just 2 years. I was talking to Fabian, and same with Manny, saying 2 years is not enough. Even if we were storing them ourselves, which we plan on doing, it's just not enough to be taking the tools and manipulating them. Here's a second question. You're going on sabbatical, are you not?
July 1st for the full year.
Oh my heavens, yeah, for a full year. That's exciting.
July to June. Yep.
So interesting times ahead for you. I just actually remembered that. So.
Oh, yep. I'm going to be doing a research project involving longitudinal as much as I can get. I'm looking for 10 years or more data on ebook patterns of use at the title level and at a fairly granular LC level. That's basically what I'm doing. But print books, if I can get the data, and ebooks, if I can get the data that far back. That one's speaking of converting, that one's very problematic because I'm going to have to deal with converting R4 to R5 ebook usage data going 10 years back. Yeah. So so I'm very much on that. And for anybody who can actually give me 10 years back, I have to go all the way back to R3 because even R4 doesn't go that far back. So anyway, yeah, so it'll be interesting. Oh, by the way, I just suddenly remembered back on the other subject about, things changing in a big way and the data changing and how the publishers are responding. Of course, the other gigantic factor in the marketplace is OA. I don't know if everybody here has seen the relatively new report that just came out. It's a preprint, I think, study on OA adoption by discipline. And so I've always said that chemistry was the bad guys because they were in the single digits of OA journal articles, but business has now taken the crown for the most evil, refusing to adopt OA journal article publishing because chemistry's managed to move into the double digits now. And so if that's something, but that
if you can send a link or a reference, I'd be interested in reading that. I don't know if you and I are the only two left, or I see a lot of people have left the conversation. I've just opened up comments.
Well, we have Mark and Natalie, but they may just not have signed off.
Oh, okay.
Either they're just being quiet or they're gone. Yeah, sure. I'd absolutely send you guys the link to that because I just saw that this morning. And it was fascinating because they're now saying we're close to 20% of all scholarly journal articles across all disciplines averaged together OA now, and that's excluding the predatory journals. And they explain in their article what their algorithm is for what they consider predatory journals. But so that's pretty significant, right? Oh, Martha says, I am here.
She would like that study.
Cynthia, why don't I just send it to the entire, Martha, I have to admit, I don't know where you are. Are you in CAAL?
She's UDEM.
Oh, okay.
Mark Rideau, she's the UL at UDEM.
Oh, sorry, I haven't met you before. I will just send it to the entire CAAL collections list, and then anybody wants to send it to any Copal or anyone else after that, it's fine. But yeah,
I've been recording everything too. So I continued, well, because there's actually, you had mentioned some things that actually relate back to the counter 5 as well.
Mhm.
So I was going to see if I could splice things together so that all the counter 5 stuff gets included in the recording.
Great.
But yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
good.
the report, that would be
I
great.
have to go. I thank you once again, Melissa, but I have a meeting in 5 minutes. I need to get something to drink beforehand. My mouth is feeling a bit dry, but I appreciate your time and effort in keeping us up to speed on this. And we'll see you tomorrow, I think, isn't it? Tomorrow or
Yep.
Wednesday?
At 2 o'clock.
If you're joining the tool one, then tomorrow it is, tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, I will. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye. Stop recording.
Oh, I just